and welcome to this week's episode of Did Shakespeare. My name is Cassidy Cash. This week we are looking at one of my favorite characters of all time, and that is Robin Hood. That's right, mentioned by name at least 3 times in William Shakespeare's plays, as well as in the source material for a lot of other dramatists in Elizabethan England. This week we're asking the question, did Shakespeare know Robin Hood? Robin Hood is mentioned 3 times in William Shakespeare's plays. He's mentioned in Two Gentlemen of Verona, Henry IV, Part 2, and As You Like It. The historicity of Robin Hood is often debated. It's been debated for centuries as to whether or not Robin Hood was a real guy. There are references to historical figures that have similar names, and there have been people who've proposed, well, this guy might be Robin Hood, or maybe that guy from history was actually Robin Hood. And there are even some people who suggest Robin Hood was an alias that people used when they were outlaws, but they didn't want people to know their identity. A lot like the Dread Pirate Roberts from the movie The Princess Bride. Bringing this in connection with William Shakespeare and where he would have heard about it, Robin Hood was a popular figure in English folklore of the time. He's still a popular figure in English folklore, but he was around and popular during Shakespeare's time. The earliest surviving text of a Robin Hood ballad is from the 15th century, called Robin Hood and the Monk. It's preserved at Cambridge University and was written after 1450. It contains a lot of the elements still associated with Robin Hood's legend, including the Sheriff of Nottingham and the fight between Robin Hood and the sheriff. There was a printed version called The Jest of Robin Hood that was printed in 1500, and it's a collection of separate Robin Hood stories that all get put together into one narrative. It was compiled into a manuscript, they think, around 1503. The character of Robin Hood was used in a lot of May Day celebrations, which was popular in England and Scotland during Shakespeare's lifetime, and Robin Hood was often like the president of this celebration. A lot of people that were celebrating would come dressed as Robin Hood or dressed as other characters from the legend. The practice of using Robin Hood to celebrate for May Day wasn't used all over England, but it was used in some areas and even carried over into Elizabethan times, and Henry VIII actually had Robin Hood portrayals done as a play at his court. One version of the Jest of Robin Hood, which is particularly interesting, was printed in 1560, just 4 years before William Shakespeare was born, and it was actually done as a play. And this copy includes a version of the story that includes a curtal friar. It is the earliest known reference to the curtal friar. To give you some examples of some of the dramatists who were using Robin Hood in their plays, in 1598, the same year that William Shakespeare bought New Place and that he wrote Much Ado About Nothing, Anthony Mundy wrote a pair of plays about the Robin Hood legend. These plays used a variety of different sources, but one of which was the Jest of Robin Hood story I mentioned earlier. The plays are quite complex, and they use the play within a play convention and have Robin Hood being presented as a play at the court of Henry VIII. And in this play written by Mundy, John Skelton, who was a courtier, is the one who is playing the character of Friar Tuck. Some historians have suggested that John Skelton may have actually written a Robin Hood play for Henry VIII, although there's no record of that. Now, what is fun is Henry VIII and his noblemen actually did impersonate Robin Hood and his merry band of men as part of Henry VIII's May Day celebrations in 1510. And Robin Hood is known to have appeared in several Elizabethan plays. In 1599, the same year that William Shakespeare opened the Globe Theatre, and the year he penned one of those references we mentioned to Robin Hood in the play As You Like It, Edward I, a play by George Peele and featuring a Robin Hood game in the play, was presented with the last independent Prince of Wales playing the part of Robin Hood. The name itself of Robin Hood was not always used in a good way. Guy Fawkes and his men who were associated with the gunpowder plot were called Robin Hoods by Robert Cecil, and it was a term that was used for outlaws or treacherous people of seditious intent. Another interesting reference is in 1584, Reginald Scott identified Robin Hood with the character of Robin Goodfellow, which is the character Shakespeare portrays in his play A Midsummer Night's Dream. Today we think of Maid Marian as a very noble person. Actually, for Shakespeare's time period, period, Maid Marian was a very bawdy character, and she featured in the May Day celebrations in a bawdy role. In Henry IV, Part 1, Shakespeare has the character of Falstaff refer to Maid Marian as a way to say that she is a byword for unwomanly or unchaste behavior. In terms of other major dramatists who also used Shakespeare's works, Ben Jonson introduced the tale of Robin Hood in a play called The Sad Shepherd. This play was incomplete, and they think that's incomplete in part because Ben Jonson died before it was finished. It doesn't really impact the legend of Robin Hood, but it's important because Ben Jonson was a major playwright and dramatist who included this legend in his work. Now, by 1642, when the Puritans had the theaters closed, the staging of Robin Hood kind of died out. It was no longer this popular thing to put on stage. It would see a reinvention and a resurgence of interest after the English Restoration, but it declined pretty much after Shakespeare. So while the story of Robin Hood would not feature prominently on stage again until after the English Restoration, it holds an important part in the history of William Shakespeare. That's it for this week here at Did Shakespeare. I'm Cassidy Cash, and I hope you learned something new about the Bard. I just finished some new artwork for you this week. I've put it up on Facebook and Twitter, so you should see it in a whole bunch of places, but you can download it in the show notes for today's episode. It is a guide for Shakespeare's history plays. We've been covering Henry VI, Part 1, and reading through some history books over in the podcast fan and book club that is That Shakespeare Society for the month of July. And as part of that, I produced a guide that walks you through the various Henrys and Richards and Dukes of Gloucester and Dukes of York in Shakespeare's plays. It outlines what the actual history was, and it also shows you where Shakespeare referred to which characters. For example, the Duke of Gloucester in Henry V is not the same guy as the Duke of Gloucester in Richard III. And if you don't have a guide to help you, you may not know that when you're exposed to Shakespeare's plays. So this guide is designed to help you walk through that history. You can download it for free by signing up for the email list, which the link for that is below this in today's show notes. Go check that out. It's there, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye-bye.